Hello everyone. Our story this week is about someone who needed help and found it in a most unexpected place.
Is it me? Is it me?
No, Mr. Wolf, I'm afraid it's not. You're not always known for being the most helpful, you know.
But I try. Think of the time when I helped the three little pigs build a house of bricks instead of with that rubbish straw and sticks that could just get blown down in one puff. And the time I helped Little Red Riding Hood make sure her cakes wouldn't poison her grandma.
I'm not sure your kind of trying to help is what everyone else thinks of as helping. I think you need to listen to our story today and find out about real helping. Are you ready?
Oh, yes. All right, then. I'll just go and sit down over here.
Right, everyone. Are you all sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Once upon a time, there lived two little elves. There was nothing they loved more than to help people out, so they found themselves as part of the National Elf Service. They worked their socks off, helping with all sorts of things, and most of the time, no one really even noticed, and lots of the time, no one really said thank you. But this is the story of a time when someone did notice the elves and found a lovely way to say thank you to them. The two little elves found themselves on a mission to a village. An old lady and an old man lived in a little cottage in the middle of the village, and from their front window they sold shoes. The old shoemaker had always been good at his job, but he was getting older and he found it harder to make the shoes as fast as before, and lots of people stopped coming to buy things from their shop. Soon the little old couple found themselves down to their last piece of leather and their last bowl of porridge. This was the moment that the elves turned up. They had heard the emergency call and were quietly watching to see just where they needed to help the most. In the corner of the room, no one had noticed them creep in, but they were just in time to hear the shoemaker say to his wife,
Well, this is it, dear. This is the last piece of leather. I've cut it into my most beautiful shoe yet, but I'm too tired now to sew it all together and do the decoration. We'll wait for the morning when there's more light to see by, and then we'll eat the last of the porridge too. Very well, dear, replied his wife. It'll work out somehow. I'm sure of it.
And the old folks slowly made their way out of the workshop and upstairs to bed. Well, this was the moment the elves had been waiting for. As the clock struck midnight, something was happening. Magic was working, and secret plans were afoot. They struck up a merry song to get themselves going. Sometimes you just need a friend who will sew and make and mend. Always here you can depend on the National Elf Service. And off to work the elves went. They stitched and sewed and cut and embroidered until the most stunning pair of shoes you have ever seen sat in splendour on the workbench. The little elves stood back to admire their handiwork. They knew they'd done a brilliant job and were very pleased with the result. Both of them yawned an elf-sized gigantic yawn, and they scampered off to catch up with some much-needed sleep. Night shifts are always exhausting. The morning sun rose in the little cottage, and the old shoemaker and his wife came slowly downstairs. Their tummies were rumbling, and they were looking forward to their last bowl of porridge. But first they came to look at the shoes, which they thought needed finishing in the workshop from the night before. In front of them were the most beautiful shoes you've ever seen. The old shoemaker's handiwork had been taken and added to with exquisite embroidery and flowers and a secret sparkle of magic elf dust, which of course the old couple couldn't quite work out what it was.
Oh my! Oh my!
Was all they could say for quite a while, and they looked around for someone to thank, but there was no one there. they drew a blank. Of course, the elves were there, really. They were hiding. But they were delighted by the old shoemaker's reaction. It was exactly what they had hoped for. The shoemaker popped the shoes into the window of the shop, and it was only a few minutes before an extremely well-dressed lady noticed the shoes on her way past. She didn't even ask the price, but gave the surprised shoemaker an awful lot of money and went home delightedly clutching her fabulous shoes. The shoemaker went out to buy more leather to make more shoes and more porridge oats to eat more porridge. He even treated himself and his wife to a delicious cake from the bakery. As the evening drew on, he cut out 2 new pairs of shoes from the leather and was thinking of starting to sew them together when he noticed how late it was getting. They had enough food for the next day, so he decided to leave the finishing off until the following day, and they went upstairs to bed. Well, this was the moment the elves had been waiting for. As the clock struck midnight, something was happening, magic was working, and secret plans were afoot. They struck up a merry song to get themselves going. Sometimes you just need a friend who will sew and make and mend. Always here you can depend on the National Elf Service. And off to work they went. The elves stitched and sewed and cut and embroidered until 2 stunning pairs of shoes sat in splendour on the workbench. The little elves stood back to admire their handiwork. They'd worked even harder this time with 2 pairs of shoes to produce, and night shifts are always exhausting. The morning sun rose in the little cottage, and the old shoemaker and his wife came sleepily downstairs. And there were 2 pairs of gorgeous-looking shoes. They both stared in amazement. "Oh my! Oh my!" was all they could say for quite a while, and they looked around for someone to thank. But there was no one there. They drew a blank. Again, they popped the shoes into the shop window, and sure enough, within only a few minutes, the shop bell rang and in walked a customer. He bought both pairs of shoes for an awful lot of money and took them home to his delighted family. The old shoemaker and his wife were equally delighted. They had enough money to buy more leather and to buy enough to eat for the next few days. And so each day continued. The old couple bought more leather, they started the shoes, but left them unfinished, and each night someone or something would come and turn them into amazing works of art. The shoemaker became known again around the area, and people started to come from near and far to buy the shoes. All seemed to be going well. But the shoemaker and his wife were worried about something. Everything was going along swimmingly, but they felt that they owed a great debt of thanks to an unknown helper. So one night they decided to stay up and watch. They prepared the leather as usual and pretended to go upstairs to bed, but this time they crept back down again. They sat in the cold darkness of the stairway and watched as 2 tiny little elves peeped out from behind some of the equipment. The elves were thin and tired looking, but they got straight to work on the leather that was waiting to be turned into shoes. And the old couple heard them sing. Sometimes you just need a friend who will sew and make and mend. Always here you can depend on the National Elf Service. The shoemaker and his wife crept back upstairs to bed, amazed at what they had just seen. The next morning, as they placed the new shoes in the shop window, they talked about what they should do. The little elves had looked tired and hungry, and their clothes were all worn out. So that day, after the shoes were sold, the shoemaker and his wife did not cut any more shoes out. They spent all day cutting and stitching and cooking and baking, and that evening, instead of putting out the leather for making shoes, they put out plates of tiny sandwiches and cakes, acorn cups full of delicious cordial, and a set of new clothing for each elf. The clothes were made of all the scraps of material the shoemaker had left, and so each outfit was a rainbow of colours. They left a note thanking the elves and asking them to go and see if others needed help, as they had enough to be able to live on for a long time. That evening, the old couple hid again and waited for the elves to appear. The elves jumped onto the workbench, all ready to start work, and stopped in amazement. They read the note, tried on the rainbow clothes, and ate until they had cleared the plates. They danced around in delight and the kindness of the old couple, and as they danced, the elf magic sparkled around them, and they disappeared to go and help others who needed a hand from the National Elf Service. The shoemaker and his wife were sorry to see them go, of course, but delighted that they would be able to help others in need. They never forgot the hard work, skill, and that little bit of magic the elves had brought to make their lives so much better. Hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for listening. Bye.